Welcome to Scott's Weekend Sports today, ladies and gentlemen. Today is week number 19 of Scott's Weekend Sports. I hope you all stayed safe during Hurricane Irma. Thoughts and prayers for all of you, and let's get into my picks for college football for this week. First game is Illinois heading into South Florida to take on the USF Bulls, ranked number 22 in the nation. Give me South Florida and Charlie Strong to get back on track and finally get this offense the way we all thought it should this year. Give me USF.
I don't think USF is as good as advertised, but I think Illinois is terrible. I think USF wins this and they win it big.
Next up, Air Force heading into Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. Give me the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh to start 3-0.
I agree. Michigan's going to win in this game. I think it'll be closer than most people expect.
Next up, Oklahoma State heading into Heinz Field to take on the Pitt Panthers. Give me Mike Gundy. He's 50. And the Oklahoma State Cowboys to get the win. Mason Rudolph's going to do some things. Oklahoma State gets the win.
I think Oklahoma State will win, but I think it'll be a closer game than people expect. They'll win by a field goal.
Next up, number 25 UCLA heading into Memphis to take on the Memphis Tigers. Give me Josh Chosen-Rosen and the UCLA Bruins to get the win in Memphis.
I agree. I think the chosen one will come into Memphis, and UCLA will get the win.
Next up, number 10 Wisconsin heading into BYU. Give me number 10 Wisconsin to get another win in non-conference to start 3-0 on the season before they head into Big Ten play next week.
BYU's only chance is the fact they're playing at home, but BYU's not very good. Wisconsin rolls in this one.
Next up, Virginia Tech, ranked number 16 in the nation, heading in to take on East Carolina, who is 0-2. I'm sorry, East Carolina, but you will be starting 0-3 this year. Give me Virginia Tech to get the win to go to 3-0 on the year.
Virginia Tech is very underrated coming into the season. I think Virginia Tech will be a top 10 team before it's all said and done.
Yep. Next up, SMU heading into TCU. Give me the Horned Frogs to get a win after that big win over Arkansas last week. TCU continues its roll.
TCU is impressive. Going into Arkansas, winning big. I think TCU gets this win by at least 3 touchdowns.
Next up, the two closest teams this week in standings-wise is number 23, Tennessee, heads in to the Swamp to take on number 24, Florida. And I'll be taking the Gators somehow, some way get that offense going against one of the worst defenses in the NCAA. Give me Florida to get some sort of offense going against a very bad Volunteers defense.
I'm picking more with my heart than my head. I'm going to pick the Gators in this one, even though their offense was terrible against Michigan. It wouldn't surprise me to see Tennessee win this one, but I'm going with my Gators.
Next up, Mercer heading in to take on the Auburn Tigers after getting absolutely pummeled last week by Clemson. I think Auburn's going to bounce back and get a win over Mercer this week.
I agree. Auburn will win by 2 touchdowns at least.
Next up, Army, who is 2-0. Very happy about that. Heading in to take on Ohio State and the Horseshoe. Give me Urban Meyer and the Buckeyes to get a win to bounce back after losing to Oklahoma last week. They get the win over Army.
I think Ohio State's going to play angry this week. I think they're going to play with a lot of motivation, and they're going to beat West Point by at least 3 touchdowns.
Next up, Oregon State heading in to Wazoo to take on Washington State, the Cougars. And I think that the quarterback for Washington State is going to be too much. Give me the Cougars over the Beavers.
I agree. I think Washington State at home gets a win in this one. I think Washington State's not as good as people thought at the beginning of the year, but I think they still beat Oregon State in this one.
Next up, Tulane heading into Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. I mean, this could be a little bit of a slow game for Oklahoma, but I think they'll find a way to walk out of Norman with a win. Somehow, some way, they get a win.
I agree. Oklahoma will probably let down a little bit in this game, but they're just too talented for the Green Wave. Oklahoma wins big.
Next up, Colorado State, who comes in 2-1, taking on Nick Saban and his Alabama Crimson Tide. Give me Bama at home. Too much defense for Alabama. Jalen Hurts, Bo Scarborough, that is an Alabama win for me.
Alabama's going to win this game and win this game handily.
Next up, LSU heading in to Mississippi State and Starkville, Mississippi to take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Darius Geis has looked very impressive this year, and I'll take him and LSU to continue to roll. Give me LSU over Mississippi State.
I agree. Now, I'm Scott's monkey in this one. LSU is underrated. LSU is better than most people think. I think LSU will beat Mississippi State by at least 2 touchdowns.
Next up, Georgia State heading into University Park to take on Trace McSorley and that Michigan and that Penn State offense. Give me Penn State to get a win over Georgia State this week. Start season 3 now for James Franklin.
I agree. I think Penn State will have a little bit of a letdown this week after playing the rival Pitt. I think they'll beat Georgia State easily.
Next up, Stanford heading in to Between the Hedges to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel will be the reason why I think Georgia will get the win this week. No Jacob Eason again this week for the Bulldogs, I believe. That won't matter. Georgia gets the win over Stanford.
And you said Stanford or Stanford?
Stanford.
It doesn't matter either way. Georgia wins this game by 2 touchdowns.
Next up, Kansas State heading in to Nashville to take on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Kansas State's been the highest scoring offense for the first 2 weeks. They scored over 100 points in the first 2 games this season. Give me Kansas State to continue to put points on the board as K-State gets to win over Vandy.
This is my upset special for the week. I think Vanderbilt is going to win this ball game. I think Vanderbilt's defense is going to slow down Kansas State, and Vanderbilt's going to win in a low-scoring ball game.
Next up, number 3, Clemson heading into Louisville to take on Lamar Jackson and the Louisville Cardinals. Game day will be there tomorrow morning. I'll be taking Clemson and that red-hot Clemson Tiger defense. Clemson finds a way to walk out of Louisville with the win, but don't be surprised if Louisville gets the win.
I agree. I think this game could go either way. I think Clemson's defense is just too good. Lamar Jackson's a great player, but I think Clemson will win this one in a game that we've scored in the 20s.
Next up, Texas heading into Los Angeles to take on number 4 USC. I think USC and Sam Darnold will get the win over Texas. Tom Herman will unfortunately start the year 1-2. USC continues to roll.
Texas is just not ready for this game yet. A few years, this will be a good game, but right now I think USC wins, and they win easily.
Next up, Fresno State heading in to Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies. And I'll be taking Washington to get the win here. They've been looking very good in the Pac-12 the first 2 weeks, and I think after that big blowout last week, I know continue to roll. Washington gets the win over Fresno State.
I agree 100%. I think Washington's going to beat Fresno State, and they'll beat them badly.
Next up, number 19 Stanford heading into San Diego to take on the San Diego State team, and I think Stanford is going to get the win here, even though they are going on the road to take on a pretty good San Diego State team. I will take Stanford to get the win.
You say Stanford or Stanford?
Stanford.
This time it does matter. Stanford actually will go in and get the win against the San Diego State Aztecs.
Next up, for the ESPN, for the NFL picks for the weekend, first game of the weekend, will be the Cleveland Browns, who looked pretty good last week against the Steelers. And then we'll head into Baltimore to take on the Baltimore Ravens. For my buddy Sean Foley, I'll be taking Joe Flacco and the Ravens. Too much offense. Ravens get the win over the Browns.
I think this will be a close game. I think Baltimore is not as good as it looked in week 1. They're playing a terrible Cincinnati team, but I do think Baltimore at home gets this win.
Next up, the Buffalo Bills head into Carolina to take on the Carolina Panthers. Panthers looked a little bit skittish last week, but I'll take Cam Newton to get back on track this week, and the Panthers get the win over the Bills.
I think if this game was in Buffalo, I would take Buffalo, but since it's in Carolina, I'm going to take the Panthers to win this in a close one.
Next up, the Arizona Cardinals, who are coming off a tough loss last week to the Detroit Lions, head in to Indianapolis and Lucas Oil Stadium to take on the Indianapolis coach. Jacoby Brissett will be the starting quarterback for the Colts, and I'll be taking Carson Palmer and that red-hot Arizona Cardinal defense. Cards get the win over the Colts.
Colts might be the worst team in the NFL.
And they are.
And I think the Cardinals are not a great team this year, but I think the Colts are so bad, Cardinals will win this by at least 10 points.
I still see them going 10-6 this year, Arizona. They could be a playoff team.
Maybe right.
Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars will be hosting the Tennessee Titans. People are calling them Saxonville now after how many sacks they were putting on Deshaun Watson and that Texans offense last week. But I don't think they're going to get as much sacks this week. Marcus Mariota and the Titans will head into Jacksonville and beat the Jags this week in Jacksonville.
I'm going to disagree with you on this one. I don't think Tennessee looked as good in week 1 as I expected them to look. Jacksonville looked better. I think under Tom Coughlin's leadership, I like Jacksonville to win this at home.
Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles head into Arrowhead Stadium to take on the Chiefs. One of the best games of the weekend, in my opinion. But I'm going to go with my fantasy savior last week if I would have started him, Kareem Hunt and the Kansas City Chiefs to get the win over the Eagles in Kansas City.
I think Kansas City's going to let down a little bit after that big win against New England, but I still think, given the fact they're at home, they beat the Eagles, but it's a close game.
Next up, the 0-1 New England Patriots. We haven't been able to see that in a while, as they head into Mercedes-Benz Superdome to take on Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. I think this could be a little bit of a close game, but I will take Tom Brady and the New England Patriots to win in this shootout in New Orleans.
I think the Patriots are going to play angry. They're coming off a loss, and an embarrassing loss in the first game of the year. I think they will beat the Saints by at least 2 touchdowns.
Next up, the Minnesota Vikings will head into Heinz Field to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2 of the best defenses in the NFL, but I think the Killer Bees will get back on track this week. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Martavis Bryant will all get back on track this week. They struggled last week, but I will take my friend Terry Jules' Steelers to get the win over the Vikings on Sunday.
This is one of the best games of the weekend, in my opinion. I think Minnesota and Pittsburgh are both going to be playoff teams, and I'm actually going to pick